أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, brothers. It's good to see you all again. Alhamdulillah. The normal title of this series is Stories from the Qur'an. And as I mentioned in Jum'ah today, I wanted to, with respect to what's happening in Palestine and what's been happening in the last few weeks in particular, I wanted to talk about some ayat and stories that are in the Qur'an to do with this area, this land of Palestine, in particular Bayt al-Maqdis and Jerusalem, Masjid al-Aqsa and so forth. Right? So just from a show of hands, or just somebody shout out, can you name any stories that contain this area, that contain Masjid al-Aqsa or Bayt al-Maqdis? I'll give you a hint that Imam recited some in the Salah, inshallah. Yes. Excellent, mashallah. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam travelled on a journey, what was that journey called? Isra and Mi'raj. Yeah. What does Isra mean? A night journey. Right. So which part? What is Isra and what is Mi'raj? Excellent, mashallah. Yeah, so the Isra is when the Prophet ﷺ was taken from al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa. This journey in one night. Isra is just a night journey, right? And from there he was taken, as the brother said, on a journey throughout the heavens, including a tour of paradise, a tour of Jannah. Right, and that part is called the Mi'raj. What the Imam Sahib recited today was the beginning of Surah Isra. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawla. Subhanalladhi, a statement of astonishment, showing that this is something impressive. Subhanallah, the one who took his slave on a night journey from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, the surrounding area of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed. So excellent, this is one part of the Qur'an that mentions this blessed area. What else? What other stories do you remember, or parts of the Qur'an talk about this area? Excellent. Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, he was a prophet from Bani Israel, right? One of the many prophets in Bani Israel. And it is during the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam that Bani Israel flourished, probably the most, right? And he's one of the most famous names, even amongst Jews and Christians, when it comes to this area. Why? Because he built Masjid al-Aqsa in a very grand and beautiful way upon the foundations left by his forefathers. And we'll talk about just a quick overview of the history, until the point of the revelation of the Qur'an of this area. But nonetheless, that is one of the ways that the Qur'an mentions this area. What else? Imam Sahib also recited the story between Musa alayhi salam and Bani Israel. When Musa alayhi salam said, I'll go forth and enter into this blessed land. Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. Remember? And Bani Israel refused to go in because it required some battles to reconquer that area. Right? And we'll talk about that inshallah today as well. And anything else? Any other references to this area, the land of Palestine, or the area of Bayt al-Maqdis, or Masjid al-Aqsa in particular? Dawood alayhi salam, excellent. Right. And we'll talk a little bit about that maybe as well, inshallah. Anyone watching the camera going to think there's an earthquake? Everyone play along. Whoa. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this area in particular in a few different ayat, right? As a place in particular that Allah has blessed. Allah has put barakah in it. And Allah made it muqaddas. What does muqaddas mean? They say it means something which purifies. When you enter it, it's so pure that you leave it purified from your sins. This is part of the, in English you say holy, or sanctified, or sacred. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions many different prophets linked to this area. Not just to Bani Israel, but even before them, such as Lut alayhi salam. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after He took Lut alayhi salam from his area when the punishment came, He took him to this area, Bayt al-Muqaddis. Right? So who built it? Who established it as a sanctified place on earth? Well, somebody asked this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, he asked, Ya Rasulullah, what was the first masjid ever made on earth? And what do you think he said? Masjid al-Haram, right? In Mecca. That was the first masjid made on earth. Who made it? Who established it? Adam alayhi salam. Right? But what was the second? Masjid al-Aqsa. This place we're talking about, it's not some recent, recent thing. It's not something which just came even with the lifetime of Bani Israel or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No. It was right from the beginning. The second masjid established for the worship of Allah on earth by human beings. And what was the time between the two? 40 years. 40 years. So they said, Adam alayhi salam or his son, established this or built this area, right from the first generation of human beings. What happened after that? Ibrahim alayhi salam, right, the great prophet, he rebuilt or raised it upon those foundations that Adam alayhi salam or his son established it. Right? Just like he did what? He rebuilt or re-established the Kaaba in al-Masjid al-Haram. Okay, and there's a lot of symbolism in this as well. First, Ibrahim alayhi salam, on his journey out of Palestine, he went to Mecca. And we all know the story of Hajj. Right? He took Hajar alayhi salam and their baby Ismail alayhi salam, who would later become a prophet. Right? And he left them in this valley, and he left them with some water and dates. He turned around and started walking. And Hajar alayhi salam said, where are you going? Did Allah command you to leave us? And he said, yes. So she said, then Allah will take care of us. And we all know the story of Hajj. But Ibrahim alayhi salam used to come back and visit his son, Ismail alayhi salam. And during one of these visits, He and his son Ismail built the Kaaba, right, upon the foundation that we see today. It was a bit longer, rectangular. It included the semicircle bit that we see next to the Kaaba today. It was that long. So if you pray in that bit, you're actually praying inside the original foundation of the Kaaba as laid down by Ibrahim alayhi salam. But anyway, this is built by Ibrahim alayhi salam, was raised on these foundations were laid. And in Palestine, Ibrahim alayhi salam lived with his other son, Ishaq alayhi salam. And he and Ishaq alayhi salam, or some say even Ishaq's son alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam. So Isaac, Ibrahim, Abraham, Ishaq, Isaac in English, and Yaqub, Jacob. Right? They established Masjid al-Aqsa. The whole area that we see on those maps is not just the golden dome that we see now. That's right in the middle of it, but it's actually much bigger than that. That whole area, that was Masjid al-Aqsa. That was established in some kind of foundation. We don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what, but that area and that was created, re-established as a masjid. So we know that Bani Israel are the descendants of which of the two sons of Ibrahim alayhi salam? Let's see one of the younger brothers answer this. Ibrahim alayhi salam had two sons, Ismail alayhi salam, Ishmael, and Ishaq alayhi salam, Isaac. Yes, bro. Yes, Ishaq alayhi salam, he had a son called Yaqub alayhi salam. Excellent. Normally in school you should raise your hand. Good boy, mashallah. But some of these brothers, these uncles, they just shout out. So you have to compete with them here. So don't raise your hand, just shout out when I ask a question, okay? Ishaq alayhi salam, he had a son called Yaqub. And Yaqub alayhi salam, he was a prophet as well. And he had another name, which is Israel. So Bani Israel is who? The children of Israel. And Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam, he had many different sons. 12 sons. And those sons gave birth to more and more children, and they became the 12 tribes of Bani Israel. And one of the sons has a whole surah in the Qur'an named after him. One of the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam. What surah is that? Yusuf, Surah Yusuf. Right? Yusuf alayhi salam was the son of Yaqub alayhi salam. He was the son of Ishaq alayhi salam, and he was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam's other son was Ismail alayhi salam. Amongst his descendants was no other prophet until who? Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Say sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Right? Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was the final prophet, and he united all of the different peoples of who? All of the followers of all of the different prophets. Because essentially, all of their message, all of their beliefs, all of their da'wah was the same. Which was, worship Allah alone. And follow whatever guidance Allah sends you. Right? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, final messenger. Now, rewind back a few centuries. Yusuf alayhi salam, in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, where did they begin living? They were living in this area. They were living in Palestine, near this area of this sanctified place, Masjid al-Aqsa. But what happened during the time of Yusuf alayhi salam in that story? There was a famine. Right? So in that famine, where did they go? To Egypt. Remember, Yusuf alayhi salam was taken as a boy. He grew up in Egypt, and the rest is history. Then there was a famine. A lot of people had to move from Palestine, including the Bani Israel, the descendants of Yaqub alayhi salam, and they then lived and established themselves in Egypt. Over the centuries, however, they became enslaved. They became slaves. Under who? Fir'aun. The Pharaoh turned them into slaves and used to oppress them and subjugate them. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a mighty messenger of his, alayhi salam, to liberate them from Pharaoh, from Egypt. To take them back to where? This place, Masjid al-Aqsa, Palestine, this sanctified area. What was that messenger's name? Musa alayhi salam. Moses, Musa alayhi salam. Right? But Musa alayhi salam, he grew up with a very different mentality to the rest of Bani Israel who were slaves. Where did Musa alayhi salam grow up? In the palace, where he was rubbing shoulders with who? Leaders, with people with pride and arrogance. And although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nurtured him and protected him from the bad consequences of growing up with Fir'aun, Allah also protected him from the negative consequences of growing up amongst subjugated and oppressed people. And this is one of the biggest differences between Musa alayhi salam, the way he acted and the way he carried about himself, and the rest of Bani Israel at this time. Because if you read the story of Bani Israel, and it's probably the most oft repeated story in the Qur'an of these people, Bani Israel. This was the Ummah just before the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a timeline. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us so many of their stories. Why? So that we can reflect and learn from their mistakes. And we can learn from them. And because we're going to make the same mistakes as them. So amongst their problems was they grew up with a very subjugated mentality. If you are being oppressed as a slave, then you begin to feel defeated inside in your heart. So when Musa alayhi salam, skip to the end of the story, he and Bani Israel, they escaped Pharaoh. They escaped Fir'aun. They saw so many miracles of Musa alayhi salam. Right? What were some of the miracles they saw? The signs of Musa alayhi salam. The stick turned into a snake. The parting of the sea. Yes, his hand became glowing white. And all of the different signs sent to, wonders shown to the people of Egypt, and even the plague sent to Fir'aun and his people. So they escaped. Imagine they've escaped now after so many years of being enslaved. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the ayat that Imam Sahib recited earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Qur'an, remind them, remember, tell people of these stories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ جَعْلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا وَآتَاكُمْ مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. And mention when Musa alayhi salam said to his people, O my people, remember the favor of Allah upon you, when He appointed among you prophets and made you possessors and gave you that which He had not given anyone before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Bani Israel, the children of Ishaq alayhi salam and their descendants, so many favors, so many blessings. Among the blessings was that there would always be a prophet among them to help guide them. When one prophet died, Allah would send another one. And the last prophet of Bani Israel was who? Isa alayhi salam, very good. But then, imagine now they've escaped from Pharaoh, and now they've come back close to where their great-great-great-grandfather used to live, Ibrahim alayhi salam, in Palestine. And Musa alayhi salam says to them, يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين. O my people, enter the holy land which Allah has assigned to you, and do not turn back and thus become losers. But what did they say? They said, قالوا يا موسى إن فيها قوما جبارين إنا لن ندخلها حتى يخرجوا منها فإن يخرجوا منها فإنا داخلون. Oh Musa, we're not going in there. There are people of tyrannical strength there, tyrants, jabbarin, in there, and we're not going to go in and fight to liberate this place. We're not going to go in until they leave, and when they leave, then we'll go in. What did they do? They disobeyed the command of their prophet, and disobeying the command of the prophet is disobeying the command of Allah, right? Why? One of the reasons was they were still internally subjugated. They felt weak and scared. These were people who, just maybe a few days or a few months or a few years ago, they were enslaved by Pharaoh. So they still have that weakness in their hearts. Except for a few, very small number of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there were 2 men among them who feared to disobey Allah, the one who bestowed all those blessings upon them. And they said to their people, come on, let's go in. If you go in, then Allah will make you victorious. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you victorious. But you have to have tawakkul in Allah. You have to be put your trust and your reliance in Allah. Then you will be winners. But again, that didn't help them. They still suffered, many of them still suffered from this weakness. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was preparing that land for them, this land we're talking about today, Bayt al-Maqdis, this holy land, Masjid al-Aqsa is in there, right? On their foundations at least are in there. But it's been taken over by other people, oppressors who took over, and they need to go back in there and reclaim or take the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seriously. But they're saying, no, we're not going to go in there. What's worse is when Musa alayhi salam said, told them to go in, they said, you and your Lord, you go and fight. They said, you and Allah, you go and fight, we're going to stay here. And this is one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you're not ready to come to this place. Musa alayhi salam made dua to Allah, complaining that these people, they're not listening to me, most of them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, because of this, this is forbidden for you. You cannot go back to this blessed holy land until you have to wander around in the deserts for 40 years. After that time, maybe you can come back. What happened during these 40 years? The people who were disobedient to Musa alayhi salam, the people who were suffering from that weak and subjugated outlook, all of those people passed away, and their children who were born and raised in freedom, they were now ready to come back and take this action. Incidentally, this statement was echoed and a stark contrast was made a few thousand years later. with the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, remember, took some companions to the Battle of Badr, it was going to start off as something much easier, and then it escalated into a battle. The Prophet ﷺ wanted to see if the companions with him were ready to go into battle, if they were willing. And in contrast to the companions of Musa alayhi salam, most of them, look what Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu said. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu was the leader of the Ansar. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ were of two types. Those who were from Makkah and they migrated to Medina, they were called the Muhajirun. And those who were in Medina and welcomed the companions, the Muhajirun, they gave them their houses, they gave them their wealth, they shared everything with them. Those people were called Ansar, the helpers. One of their leaders was Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. And the Prophet ﷺ asked if those brothers, those Muslims were ready, those companions were ready or willing to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to take back the things which were taken from them. And he said, radiyallahu anh, we will never say to you, Ya Rasulullah, as the children of Israel said to Musa alayhi salam, that you and your Lord go and fight, we will sit here. If you seek to cross the sea and went in the sea, we'll follow you into the sea, and none of us will remain behind. We would not hate for you to lead us to meet the enemy tomorrow. We are patient in war and victorious in battle. May Allah allow you to witness from our efforts that which comforts your eyes, brings you happiness, O Messenger of Allah. Therefore march forward with the blessing of Allah. We're right with you. So this was a stark contrast between the reaction of Bani Israel, who had just came out of slavery and bondage, and the reaction of the Ansar, of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's companions. And one of the distinctions is what? They were born free. They weren't hosting a debilitating, a weakening, subjugated mindset. So, what happened in these 40 years that Musa alayhi salam and his people are wandering around? In these years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still continued to give them so many blessings, so many miracles. Among them were, a cloud would follow them and shelter them from the sun. Among them were, Allah would send them special types of food from the sky. Among them were, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make springs of water come out from solid rocks to give them and their entire tribes water to drink. And during this time, the Torah was revealed to Musa alayhi salam. Right? Musa alayhi salam, the whole story of Musa alayhi salam, a large chunk of it happened during this time, when they were prevented from entering Masjid al-Aqsa, Bayt al-Maqdis, this area of Palestine, because of the sins of most of them. And this was very tough on Musa alayhi salam. He longed to see Masjid al-Aqsa. And he used to make dua to Allah, "Oh Allah, when I die, let me be buried right close to Masjid al-Aqsa, just a stone's throw away from it, so I can see it." And the Prophet ﷺ, later he explained how much Musa alayhi salam wanted to see and wanted to be close to Masjid al-Aqsa, but he was prevented. Just like many Muslims today are also prevented. And those people who are prevented and long to see Masjid al-Aqsa are following the footsteps of Musa alayhi salam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when some companions asked him, which mosque has more reward for praying in it? Masjid al-Nabawi, his mosque, or Masjid al-Aqsa? The Prophet ﷺ said, Masjid al-Nabawi, Masjid al-Aqsa, in Masjid al-Nabawi, just praying any prayer gives you 4 times the reward of praying in Masjid al-Aqsa. Okay, there are various different narrations, but in this one he said this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So Masjidul Nabawi, you get 1,000 times prayer reward. And they said then, therefore, Masjidul Aqsa you get 250 times. But then the Prophet ﷺ said, but there will come a time where some people will be so desperate to see Masjidul Aqsa, just to have a small place to put a chair where they can look at Masjidul Aqsa, that it would be more beloved to them than the whole world and everything in it. So longing to see and enter Masjidul Aqsa is something which many Muslims throughout history have gone through. And throughout all of history, most of history, it has been a place of conflict that has been unsafe to go to, except for when it was under the control of the Muslim Ummah. It was during the control of the Muslim Ummah, that is when it was safe for Muslims, Christians, Jews, everyone to live together. During the time of Umar radiallahu anh, and then after that, the time of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah, and during some years after that, and even the Ottoman Empire, during these times, everyone was free to come to this place. But when it was taken, every time it was taken from Muslims, it became a place of war and fighting and these types of things. So periodically throughout history, there has always been a cycle of when it was safe, when people could come, and when it was unsafe, when people wished that they could come and even look at it. So, during that time, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade Bani Israel from re-entering Masjid al-Aqsa and the land of that area of Palestine, Jerusalem, Musa alayhi salam passed away. And he was buried close to Masjid al-Aqsa, close to Jerusalem, just as he had made dua. But who did Bani Israel, who was the prophet who came shortly after Musa alayhi salam? Yusha ibn Nun alayhi salam. The prophet Yusha alayhi salam. In English, Joshua, I think. Joshua, isn't it? The prophet Joshua alayhi salam. Now, who remembers who he was? We talked about him last time we did the stories of the Qur'an. He was one of the characters in the last story. He was the Fatah of Musa alayhi salam. He was the servant and disciple of Musa alayhi salam. So he was learning wisdom and knowledge from Musa alayhi salam from a young age. He was with Musa alayhi salam when in the journey looking for Khidr. Remember? In that story. So anyway, he was one of the two people who was encouraging Bani Israel to go in and go back to al-Aqsa and fight for its liberation. Him and one other person, according to the Mufassirin. But anyway, after the death of Musa alayhi salam, some time passed and he became the prophet. Now, those people who refused to go in and liberate Masjid al-Aqsa, they had passed away. Now the people who had grown up with a victorious or a free mindset, they were now ready to go back and liberate Palestine. So they fought alongside their prophet Yusha ibn Nun until it was recaptured. And this is the battle, the famous battle in which Yusha ibn Nun pointed at the sun, because it was happening on Friday. And the time of Maghrib was about to come. And the day after Maghrib is what? After Maghrib is the day of Saturday. And that's a day that they are not allowed to fight. So he pointed at the sun and he said, "O sun, you are under Allah's command and I'm also under Allah's command. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped the sun from setting that day until Palestine was recaptured. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this land a period of victory after expulsion, victory after expulsion, victory after expulsion. And then He said, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when He said to enter into Jerusalem in a state of humility and humbleness. Sujjadan. Right? Prostrating your heads. Like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered Mecca after the peaceful conquest of Mecca. In a state of humility. His head was almost touching the neck of his riding beast. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they entered it and there was a period of prosperity. And during this time, they said to their prophet, so Prophet Yusha ibn Nun passed away and he was succeeded by other prophets. One of these prophets was called Shamweel. So Bani Israel now is back in this area, right? The Muslim Ummah at that time, they're back in this area. They're worshipping Allah. Some of them are righteous, some of them are not righteous. And some of them asked their prophet Shamweel, ask Allah to make us a king, appoint for us a king. Right? And then we'll, fight and protect this place and go out and spread the message of Islam and so on and so forth. So he said, if Allah gives you a king, will you follow him? Will you, obey him and defend this land and so forth? They'll say, yeah, of course. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, even though they have said it, as soon as Allah told them to fight, they refused. Then their prophet said to them, Allah has appointed Talut as your king. Talut, this person that Allah had chosen to be their king from amongst themselves. And then what did some of them say? They said, no, he can't be our king. You just asked Allah to appoint you a king and now they're saying, no. They're disobeying Allah. What happens when they disobey Allah? That holy place becomes forbidden for them. Right? This is a pattern. And it happens with all Muslims. If you begin to disobey Allah a lot in society, then Allah will prevent you from certain good things. Amongst them is access to His beloved places, such as Masjid al-Aqsa, a lesson for us all. So they said, no, he can't be our king. Why not? Because he doesn't have money and he's not from a prestigious class amongst us. But their prophet said to them, no, he is your king. Allah has appointed him as your king, and he gave 2 extra reasons. Even though one is enough, if Allah appoints him, that's enough for you to follow. But he said, Allah has given him knowledge and strength. These 2 things are ideal for this job. So, Jalut set out with a people. Right? He wanted to recapture and go back into this area, this land of Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis, especially Masjid al-Aqsa. And after they were again expelled because of their sins. But he didn't want just anyone. He wanted the most sincere people, the most disciplined people with him, the most righteous people with him. So they said he started off with 10,000 or more than that. And he said, now here's your first test. We're marching for a long time. Allah will be testing you with a river. If you drink from this river, then you can't carry on with us. This is a test for your patience and your obedience to Allah. Imagine you're walking maybe in the desert and you're marching, you see a river, you think, wow, go and drink lots. It's natural, right? He's saying, no, that's your test. All you can have is one cupful, one handful of water, and whoever drinks more, they can't come. So, most of them drank from the river except for 310 and a few more. So from so many thousand to 310 and a few more than that, 314, 313. Now how many, this number rings a bell, right? Put your hands up if you recognize this number, 310 and then a few. Where do you recognize it from? Battle of Badr, right? This is a nice reflection of the people who were the sincere, most disciplined people who were with Jalut, and likewise the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Badriyun, the people at Badr, who had a special status for the rest of their lives, right? So when they crossed it, they saw a huge army that they had to fight in order to take and protect Masjid al-Aqsa. And some of them began to say, wow, this is very difficult. But a few of them said what? They had tawakkul in Allah. They said, how many times has a small army defeated a big army? By the permission of Allah. Right? They had tawakkul, trust and reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they went forth, they made dua to Allah to give them sabr, patience, steadfastness, perseverance. This is what you need in order to enter and liberate the holy lands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need iman, you need tawakkul, and you need patience and perseverance to be able to carry out this task. Another lesson for us. But there was one massive leader of the opposing army, of the enemy army. And he was a really tough guy. Used to be very vicious, and everyone was scared of him. And Talut said to him, and back then, one person used to come and challenge and have a one-on-one fight before. Right? So he was challenging them. He was saying, who's going to come and fight me? Nobody came. Everyone's looking at this huge man. His name was Jalut. Who's going to come and fight me? No one. Who's going to go and fight that man? And then a young boy steps up with his slingshot. And this man had armor from head to toe. And he's laughing. Who is this boy? I don't want to find a little boy. I don't want to kill you. But this young man, this boy, he said, but I'm going to kill you. He took his slingshot and he aimed for the slit for his eyes in his armor. And he shot him, he said Bismillah, shot him, and the man died. And they won the battle. What was this boy's name? The Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. He wasn't a prophet then, but later he became the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. And because of this band of sincere Muslims, sincere people with discipline and patience and perseverance, they went back into Palestine, they went back into Bayt al-Maqdis, they went back into Masjid al-Aqsa, and some of the most prosperous years of Bani Israel followed after that. Dawood alayhi salam became a prophet. He became their leader, and he had a son whose name was Sulaiman alayhi salam. Remember we mentioned that at the beginning. Right? What time is Isha? Okay. So Dawood alayhi salam had a son called Sulaiman alayhi salam, and he was a mighty prophet of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him some very special powers, some miracles. What were some of his miracles that he could do? Speak to animals, and he used to command the jinns. And the jinn used to be so scared of him that if he would command them to do something, they would be scared to disobey Sulaiman alayhi salam. Right? So he had Masjid al-Aqsa built in a huge glorious foundation. Big massive construction, and he made many other masjids as well during his time, during his lifetime. And he made dua for three things. When he completed building Masjid al-Aqsa, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned a beautiful hadith. He said, when Sulaiman alayhi salam finished building Masjid al-Aqsa, he made dua for three things. One, judgment that was in line with the judgment of Allah. Two, a type of kingdom that nobody else had before or after him. And three, that nobody came to this masjid intending to pray 2 rak'ah for the sake of Allah, except that when he leaves, he will be cleaned of all of his sins, just like the day his mother gave birth to him. Allahu Akbar. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a very beautiful way, he said, he was given the first two things, and I hope that he is given the third as well. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ is like he's saying Ameen to his dua. And he's reiterating the same dua for his ummah. So, if somebody sincerely goes to, the dua was, if somebody goes to Masjid al-Aqsa with the intention of just praying for Allah, then Allah will wipe away all of his sins like the day he was born, he came out of his mother's belly. Allahu Akbar. Then, I'm just going quickly here now, and we'll stop soon, inshallah. This was the time of great prosperity for Bani Israel. Right? But after this time, other prophets came, and there were cycles again of Bani Israel being righteous, many of them being righteous and many of them becoming rebellious and corrupt and evil. Right? And when they would become evil, Allah would send them another prophet to fix them and remind them to turn back to Allah. Amongst the prophets who came after them were Yahya alayhi salam, right? Or Zakaria alayhi salam. And this is the time of Maryam alayhi salam and Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. And because of many of them, they tried to kill Isa alayhi salam, and they killed Yahya alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them again by allowing other people to come and take over the land again. Until the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born. And when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born, he said later on that there was a light coming out from his mother, Amina, and it was illuminating some cities of this area of Sham, of Palestine. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ, once he said, I saw in a dream that from beneath my pillow, the light of the Qur'an was going and following, and I was following the light, and it went all the way to Masjid al-Aqsa and the surrounding land. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as the end, the finality of all prophets. And the promise of Allah for the people to enter and worship Him in these holy sanctuaries was linked to their obedience and was linked to their believing in Allah and worshipping Allah alone and following their prophets. If we follow our Prophet, if anyone, even in the past, followed their Prophet and was sincere to Allah, Allah would let them come back. But if they were not, then they would be expelled and other people would overcome them. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ started his da'wah, where did the Muslims used to pray to? Masjid al-Aqsa. That was the direction. Right now, all of the mosques in the world, they're facing in one direction, right? Towards one place. Towards the Kaaba. But in the early days of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, they prayed towards Masjid al-Aqsa. This shows this was the natural continuation of Allah's prophets all having this one Qibla. But the Prophet ﷺ, after living for 10 years after his prophethood in Mecca, and then 1.5 years afterwards, after they were living in Medina, that's when the Qibla changed to Masjid al-Haram for everyone. Right? And that signified the consolidation of all of the messages of all of the different prophets, from Adam alayhi salam to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was praying towards Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Jewish tribes would see this and they would know this is a sign that he is a prophet along the same religion and the same deen, the same way of life as all of the other previous prophets. And they were convinced. Some of them followed the Prophet, some of them disbelieved or rejected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The story of Masjid al-Aqsa obviously doesn't end there. Right? At the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although the Qibla changed, many of the Sahaba, the Muslims, used to long to visit and to long for going to Masjid al-Aqsa. And it was the time after the death of the Prophet ﷺ that it was again re-liberated without a drop of blood being spilt. And inshallah in the next, in 2 weeks' time when we convene, we can talk about some of the pick up the story again of Masjid al-Aqsa from this point in time right until, or later on, maybe until even today. Right? So we'll end there with enough time inshallah to prepare for Isha. So any comments?